Hey everybody, thanks for attending our AI Summit. This is our panel today on Zero Trust and AI. I think it comes pretty timely, and I'm privileged to be here with colleagues, friends, just people I've known for uh, several years and have respected for even longer than that too. So pretty soon I'm going to introduce you to Jason Garbus, Jerry Chapman, and Ken Huang. First, I'll just kind of let everybody know what we want to talk about here, and I think it's important to talk about. Certainly, we're here at an AI summit talking about the impact that AI has had on our industry. Uh, it's being either used, adopted, or even just incorporated and implemented in a lot of products that we're using today. On the other side of that, zero trust is a security strategy that we've been talking about for also about a dozen years. And where do these two things intersect? How do they impact each other? Has AI made zero trust even more important, but at the same time, has it also enabled how we can better utilize and implement zero trust principles? We're going to talk about that and more. But first off, I'm going to introduce the great panel that I have, and I would love to start with Jason Garbus to just introduce himself a little bit to everybody and say hi.
Great. Hi, John. Great to be with you again. You and I have known each other for, I think it's coming up on 10 years now. So I'm Jason Garbus. I'm founder and principal at a consulting firm called Numberline Security, where I focus on zero trust. I really work closely with enterprises to help them define and execute effective zero trust strategies. I'm also a longtime volunteer with the Cloud Security Alliance, where myself, along with Jerry, are co-chairs of the Zero Trust Working Group. So in that role, we spent a lot of time working with John and colleagues at the CSA, as well as practitioners in the industry, thinking about, writing about, talking about, and really pondering the tough questions of what is this thing called zero trust and how do enterprises make best use of it. Obviously, AI is a gigantic trend in the industry. So I think as we think through the Venn diagram of where we are, this will be a really good session for us.
Thank you, Jason. And with that, too, let's go to the other co chair of our zero trust efforts, Jerry Chapman.
Yes, hi, John. Thanks for having me on this great panel here. My name is Jerry Chapman. As Jason said, I am also a co-chair of the CSA Zero Trust Working Group. I'm also a director of identity at an organization known as Verinext. I actually consider myself a cybersecurity professional with a focus on identity and zero trust. One thing Jason didn't mention is we are co-authors of a nice renowned book of called Zero Trust Security, an Enterprise Guide. So we spend a lot of time talking about zero trust together.
Oh, looking forward to that too. And I know I have a copy of several of your books in the past. And speaking of authors and another co-chair of CSA's AI efforts, Ken Huang, Ken, say hi and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thank you, John, and certainly welcome to this distinguished panel on the AI and zero trust with Jerry, Jason, John. I regard myself as an AI researcher and book author. I wrote a few books on AI, including the generative AI security, which is related to the topic today, and other book like more on the management strategic perspective. The upcoming book will be Agentic AI as a series and practice. That should be really interesting. I also co-chair the cloud security working groups on AI safety initiatives, including the AI control working group, and also the organization responsibility working group. So I have a lot of fun working with John as well. So yeah, just about me. Thanks.
Yeah, so this is just a panel of like friends that hang out together, and we get to actually record one of our conversations finally. So with that too, we should probably just get into really the good stuff. I think that's what people want to hear about, and I know we're all anxious to talk about these things. And so yeah, we kind of set this up with AI being this big shift towards not just the use of it, as we're seeing people using the heavy use of things like ChatGPT over the last 2 years, but then certainly just the integration. We're seeing Microsoft tools integrating all these co-pilotization and all these co-pilot types of products. And it just makes me think of it like, how do, let's start with you, Jason. So how do we see zero trust principles being applied to just this new role, this new shift with AI in our environments today?
So zero trust, of course, is a security strategy based on a certain set of principles or tenets. And um, when you think about AI, I think there's really a couple of ways to think about it. And one clearly is that you could view, well, AI or AI systems are just another application on the network, and therefore I need to secure it in exactly the same way that I do, whether it's running on-prem or whether it's SaaS. And I think that is true, but it's, I think, too narrow. And because what AI brings with it is, especially the gigantic explosion in the use of generative AI based on LLMs and things like that, is the significant risk of data loss and the opacity of these systems. So there are absolutely some elements of AI and usage of AI that are directly applicable to, let's call it, the way that we normally think about zero trust. And then there's, if you widen the aperture a little bit, realizing that zero trust is a strategy or a mindset is now you have to look at how business people, non-technical people are using AI, what data is going out there, and then what risks are associated with potentially incorrect or hallucinated outputs of AI models. I mean, there's so many dimensions to this, but I think that's a good starting point from my perspective.
Like that too. So, it's interesting too. So you mentioned, AI, and we've certainly talked about the complications of AI. So having that business lens, so that we can understand risk and data. Data loss is going to be really important. Data is going to be super important as we see AI engines not only inputting but outputting new data that we're going to utilize and analyze. So, Jerry, what are your thoughts on that? Are you seeing anything that's really unique when it comes to these AI environments?
So when I think of AI and I think about the security and I think about, all the stuff we're doing with it and I think about zero trust, um, I actually take AI and put it in a very distinct, not a box, but a distinct a way to view it. And I look at AI as an identity. It becomes another identity in the fabric of what we're trying to accomplish, whether it's trying to get to data to feed it and so it can get the learning and be able to provide input and guidance around whatever that happens to be, or if it's actually outputting data, so someone's asking it's a question. But so some of the agent stuff I think Ken will talk about, it just becomes in my world it becomes an identity, and ultimately when you think about the full zero trust process that we talk a lot about at the CSA with the 5-step approach. One of those elements is what is the how are we mapping transaction flows and how are we driving interactions of systems? And this is just another one of those systems that you have to actually map those transaction flows. You have to understand the identity that and what it's gaining access to and where it's getting, and really some of the stuff that Jason mentioned around data loss and ensuring that that doesn't happen when you start thinking about what is this identity, this AI identity doing in my environment. That's a starting point. I go much deeper, but I'll leave it there.
Yeah. No, no, I like that. And of course, data transaction flows, mapping those is a big part of zero trust. But the identity piece and being that being that unique part of AI, I think that makes a lot of sense just because uh, we see the proliferation of identities, especially machine identities, and
That's
what
right.
we're calling often non-human identities, which are connecting all these systems. So as AI is integrated into products, access to systems, and retrieving information from different databases, there's identities that are making those things happen. So yeah, I think identity is going to be a huge thing. That makes complete sense to me. Uh, Ken, let's go to the other side here too. So we talk about zero trust from our zero trust experts. Not to say that you aren't, because I know you know zero trust very well also. But from that AI perspective too, are you also looking at the unique aspects of AI and how zero trust can be applied to those models?
Yeah, certainly the unique feature of especially the generative AI, right? It's non-deterministic. So if we really want to uh, apply the AI like into ZTA, we need to make sure that have some human in the loop. LLM as a judge into it. Um, Jerry mentioned the identity, right? So how do you do the identity management, especially on the policy perspective, like policy management? You can define the policy information, or you can administrate the policy that can using the generative AI to help, maybe in the real time. But for the policy decisioning and policy informants, that really cannot be used as a like a decisioning point, right? It can do a asynchronous analysis or process. Uh, Go back to the data scenario. You certainly another way around using the generative AI for data protection, right? One example is the Department of Defense. It's in production, right? It's also has a research paper published. Is using the generative AI to tag the data, because data tagging is very important for the fine-grained access control, especially the attribute-based access control. And the tagging process is really a manual process previously. So using the generative AI to help to tagging this data and put the whole policy management and access control into production this way, certainly can using generative AI to bootstrap, right, somehow.
Yeah. I like how you kind of turned that around too. So how are we using generative AI tools to actually better implement zero trust? And it's about data tagging and also doing kind of that, you know, tracking those policy information points, something that has been very
Yeah.
manual.
So,
And with
so
generative AI,
another
can
way,
automate.
if I can add that, is
Yeah.
certainly the ZTA can be used to protect the data pipeline, like data you have pre-training pipeline, instruction fine-tuning, human feedback with reinforcement learning, right? And then you have the influence point, like you deploy the model. Once the model deployed, you either use a fine-tuned model, it's hosted maybe in your own environment, then you are responsible. You have to using zero trust, or it's maybe shared responsibility. It can be like if you fine-tuning a GPT-4 model, right? That's hosted by either OpenAI or Azure. So that's OpenAI responsibility. Uh, but yeah, ZTA can certainly apply to data security, model security, supply chain management, and also the whole application stack. So
It's
yeah.
kind of how we, so it's going to be so important on how we set up these models, especially if we're taking that zero trust approach. And you mentioned the fact that, hey, are we, what kind of a RAG are we connecting these data models to? Are we
Right.
using inference to make sure that there's no outside or interruption, so to speak? So I think those are kind of the important things I'm thinking that you were talking about, right?
Yeah, yeah. Also, the attack surface is increased, like you
Yeah.
mentioned the RAG, retrieval augmented generation, which is vector database, right? And maybe other database as well. So if you are talking about the agent, then the whole multiple agent, this is all the new attack interface. Yeah.
And I do want to talk about agents at some point too, but I do want to get back to Jason too, just talking about Ken's explained some of the AI models and the different approaches that we could take, the different types of models that we can adopt, setting up inference, and even going into the agentic realm too. Jason, as we decide to either make decisions on how we're deploying like the types of generative AI that we're using, is zero trust going to be I guess a tool or a way that we can actually measure and assess how we want to use generative AI tools?
I think that it is, that to some degree, it's going to be a secondary consideration. And really, the primary consideration needs to be one where you think about data and risk and even the legal side of things. So I work with a lot of enterprises, and they really struggle to put some, not even control, just get some visibility around how their employees are using these models. And the first part, of course, is to figure out how people are
Mm.
using things and to also look at they're using different models and what are the terms and conditions associated with it? And are they using a free version where whatever they put in there gets incorporated in the training for future revisions of it? Or in some cases, what the enterprise needs to do is say, no, we're going to sign up for this for the enterprise tier because the terms and conditions are that the vendor is promising to keep our data private. Now, that's a promise, and you hope that the vendor follows it, and you hope that technically it's maintained. And that's kind of all you can do unless you decide to deploy and run your own model, whether it's in an IaaS environment or on premises. And that's a very rational decision in some cases, too. I work with some enterprises where this was a financial services firm, and they were generating enormous amounts of security logs, way too many for human beings to look at. So they wanted to feed that into an AI model to help them distinguish false positives from true positives, the usual stuff. They didn't want that data fed up into a cloud environment. They needed to keep it. They felt like, from a risk perspective, they needed to keep that in their environment. So they were looking at how do we deploy this and run this ourselves. So those are privacy, data security, legal questions that really need to come first before you even then look at, from a zero trust perspective, okay, who has access to this? How is this access policy tied to identity or network?
All right. So giving us just a basic I guess like with any environment, we need to understand our environment before we can take steps to protect against things too, whether or not we want to block or enable things.
Yeah, and that's a big problem in general for enterprises. And I feel like maybe this would be a good catalyst. Maybe the adoption of AI will be a good catalyst for enterprises to say, you know what, we need to up our game in terms of the maturity and rigor that we have around getting visibility into what's going on our network. Because if you don't have that, so many other things kind of fall apart like sand versus, no, we really understand what's on our network and who is talking to what or what's connecting to what. And that gives you a much stronger foundation to make better access decisions, better security decisions, so whether it's related to AI or just core networking, for example.
And I say this all the time, right? Jason, you and I talk a lot about this, and I use the term implicit deny with explicit allow, right? And that's exactly what Jason's talking about, I think, is that visibility of understanding that you can explicitly deny all access and deny whatever you need to do to get to an explicit allow. And whether it's AI or any other application or identity or solution that you're looking towards.
Yeah. That explicit deny or allow is really interesting in this case too. But if I just reflect on the last 2 years on some of the policies, the user policies we've seen within big companies on generative AI, right? Initially, it was like, hey, you cannot use generative AI tools for pretty much anything. It was almost a complete no use policy. Fast forward to today, and there's much more allowance. The policies have changed completely, and it makes me think too. So, gosh, either of you guys can comment on this too. But when we talk about zero trust, it isn't. It's not supposed to be about explicitly allow or block, but we always talk about confidence with validation. And with that term, applying that to AI, what areas do you think we need to really focus on when we're looking at about building confidence with validation in AI models?
Well, I'll start. I think that context, right, and building context. I think AI models are going to help build the context, bring context, and to your point, can not make decisions, but give the ability to raise the decisions up to a human to actually look at some more factors and more visibility or more visibility factors and more lights in the environment to see the visibility to make those decisions. It's really a more informed decision that I think a human can make, that AI can break this or bring this to bear. To Jason's point, it's too many logs, right? Too many things coming in, too much data, and then being able to summarize that, bring that up is going to be very, very critical. And I think that's where AI is going to help drive some of the additional enforcement and support around zero trust and other security and any security within an organization.
So yeah, maybe I add that the confidence score about the model is really closely associated with the evaluation of the model, the benchmark. That's really, really hard, right? There's no perfect like from security or even from the performance, model performance perspective. There's so many benchmarks, right? Not really golden like benchmarks per se. But the recent actually scaling solution, the old scaling law is based on the models, the data, and also the computational power. The new scaling law is coming. It's more based on the chain of thought reasoning, reinforcement learning with some generic process-based reward function. That's really manifested by some of the open source model as well as the recent like OpenAI O3 model. So it can give you a kind of reasoning behind it that is a chain of thought, right? So it can explain a little bit why it will come with certain result. So that's building some confidence. And also you can actually have another model, more powerful model to measure the output of the lower model, right? In terms of confidence. So I think this is still ongoing research. I'm certainly very close related, like looking at all the literature, the recent DeepSeek R1 paper everyone talking about. I think it's fascinating the way they use the different steps, the reasoning to build the model.
So exactly how it's done will be a challenge, but I do like, especially when Jerry is mentioning, hey, AI is going to be able to collect evidence that we can use for either humans or system scoring that's going to create that confidence and provide that validation that we have. Jason, were you going to comment to that as well?
Yeah, I think that it really is going to depend on the use case for organizations to build up confidence in the outputs of these models. And a lot of the things that people are using, that lay people, non-technical people are using these models for today, it's easy to validate this. I use AI to generate an image, for example. Great. It takes me 3 seconds to look at the image and make a decision about that. Or maybe I use AI to generate, marketing copy or website copy or things like that. You do need a human being to go through that and read it and validate it. And as things get more sophisticated in terms of what we expect from AI, there absolutely does need to be either humans or other systems in the loop to validate this. And there's real risks when they don't. I mean, we saw a airline that had an AI-driven chatbot that gave incorrect advice to a customer, and because of that, the customer lost money because they weren't able to get credit or a refund, and they sued and they won in court. And the judge ruled that this AI bot, even though it hallucinated and gave incorrect result, the company had to stick by it. Now you multiply that times, now you have AI systems that are perhaps allocating millions of dollars to purchase inventory or to ship goods or to make decisions that have pretty big impact, or just even to generate code. You need to have someone who really understands a system or other systems to validate this as you get a confidence level, build up confidence for specific use cases and specific outcomes. And there's some real risks there. I mean, especially in code generation, where maybe I'm a junior developer, maybe I'm a senior developer, and I know this language really well, but I'm a beginner at Python. I use AI to generate a whole bunch of code for Python. I don't really understand it. It compiles. I use it. Who knows what risks I'm putting myself at there, either from a logic perspective or a security perspective.
And it's so interesting you saying that too, Jason, because I know we talk about, validation, like confidence with validation. If we're using AI systems to either create that validation, how how comfortable are we with it? Are we at with that? And honestly, it makes me think of too. So Ken, I want you to probably comment on this first too, but the whole movement towards agents and my opinion's changed, quite a bit on that. If we go back about a year, I really thought the not that I don't think that the agentic future is coming, but I thought it would be coming a lot faster, especially autonomous agents. But I took a different approach too, and I kind of compared it to the whole autonomous vehicle movement that we had, like 10 years ago maybe now. But when we were first doing IoT connected vehicles, I just thought, hey, autonomous vehicles are the next step. It's going to happen soon. I can't wait. But there are so many liability issues. uh, go to insurance and legal issues, and uh, it made me think of this whole agent movement where, yeah, the liability of a generative AI system creating content that we have to use for support or for validation, for chat support to validate security and compliance measures. I don't think it's gonna, these autonomous agents are gonna happen that quickly just because we have to rely on so many pieces like that too. Ken, what do you think about something like that?
Yeah, maybe I will talk about 3 points, right? First is certainly that's the really hot topic. 2025 is the agentic year. That people said, like all the bigger company, right, is into it. Google, OpenAI just released the operator last night. Actually, every pro user can use it now. So in terms of liability, there is no like. Regulatory framework or legal framework to define who is reliable for what, right? And in terms of the accident, using example like you said, the autonomous vehicle, if it is involved in the accident, who is responsible? Is the manufacturer of the car, or is the model builder who provides the model, or is the application builder who actually using the orchestration to build this agent, right? Uh, or is the data provider,
Yeah.
right? So who is
The
actually
driver, the insurance provider, the highway,
exactly, yeah. So there's no like also Biden has a AI executive order. It's just repealed by Trump, right? But Trump put out up a new regulation. It's more like for the innovation. I think it's maybe correct. We are still should push towards innovation and then look at the way to not using exact word, more like using the legal branch or legislative branch to actually enact the right a actual law, which is not really exact word. It will survive from different administrations. Yeah, so this is the second point. The third point is the agent. There is framework. We have to threat modeling it, and there's a different layer, like 7 layer. I don't think we have time to go into it, but the first layer is really the model, and the last layer is the ecosystem. That's actually in my book. I talk very deep into it, and we can threat model it for each layer, like on the model level, who has access to it, how can you enforce ZTA architecture into it, and also the ecosystem. Ecosystem means you have the tool registry or agent capability registry, discovery, right? That's happening, right? So, and how you actually enable it. So some of the tool in the agent should not really be used by certain people. So you have to have access control validation on this level, right? So there's the 7 layers we're talking about.
No, I like that approach, and we took that approach back when, going back to my autonomous and connected vehicle, correlation there. But we definitely did the same thing where, the environments are different with these new technologies now, and so we need to evaluate that for automotive vehicles. It was, hey, there's now applications interacting with the car. There's also the environment itself. There's the physical location. This isn't a, a secure data center, right? It's this computer is moving, and then it's connecting to other services. So the autonomous vehicle thing to me really hit home because there's a point where I thought, hey, we're going to see this in like 5 to 10 years. Now I question if we'll see that in my lifetime. And when it comes to certainly autonomous agents, AI is moving a lot quicker. But again, a year ago, I thought this was going to happen like within the next, 6 to 18 months. And I think because of what you described a little bit there too, Ken, I think fully autonomous agents might be a little bit further down the road, but in the near term, I still think agents are a big deal, especially agents that support, Jason, you mentioned that before, the human side of things too. So yeah, I don't know if Jason or Jerry have a comment on some of those agents, especially the autonomous agents, but I'd love to get your perspective on that too.
Well, I think that we can definitely expect in the very near future, people having personalized trained agents that they would send to meetings or do things on their behalf. I mean, you can imagine someone not showing up for this webcast recording, but sending an agent that they've trained and given guidance to. Now, would that all turn into, kind of very vague vanilla output? Probably, but I think we're not that far away from having these things have an opinion and be able to express them.
I'll tell you, I recently saw a very, very convincing demo of agents that were completely autonomous that were handling service calls from customers, voice, AI, the whole gamut, and it's very, very interesting to see. And through that, the caller doesn't even know that they're talking to an AI agent, which was very interesting because it sounded almost very lifelike. And there was a few problems where it's like, well, maybe you should have handled certain things differently, but that becomes a matter of, I think that's a maturity model that has to be considered as well.
And look, if organizations can use that to improve the level of customer service, which in general, you know how hard it is to get a human being on the phone, let's embrace that, because it's such a nightmare today when you engage with big firms. I'm not going to throw anyone under the bus, but you know,
I've seen some very convincing like bots like that too, where it feels like you're having a conversation with a real person, or a real person is presenting a certain topic to somebody else, and yeah, it's much different than it was even just 2 years ago. So that stuff's super interesting to me. And it's one of those things too, like, we're the Cloud Security Alliance, so we've been doing this whole cloud move for the last 15 years, and to me there are so many parallels with the whole cloud adoption, and part of that too is you're starting to use services like software as a service, even like how infrastructure as a service is, but you're using services that before either your company built or owned, but now you're pushing you're choosing to buy these, and you're relying on this digital supply chain. So yeah, I feel like we're seeing this now with AI, not just with AI services that we're purchasing. You mentioned a couple of the chatbots that we want to purchase and maybe implement, but even just typical products that we're using are now cloud-based, or are now AI-based, kind of like how regular products that you purchased, years ago are also now cloud-based, right? How many people are actually installing, Office on their computer? It's all subscription-based services now, and I feel like we're doing this evolution from cloud. Cloud is really integrating AI, a part of those things. Are any of you guys looking at this kind of comparison and really either strengthening your stance on zero trust, or maybe perhaps, zero trust is just, it's too challenging to implement right now unless you have specific tooling that AI provides?
I think the IT environments that we work in are enormously complex, and every organization has some unique aspects to it. And I think we are absolutely seeing both native AI capabilities from the hyperscale providers as well as third party. We can look at it from a security perspective, security configuration, cloud security posture management, those types of things. I mean, those environments are just so complex. There's hundreds and hundreds of services, each of which can be configured in thousands of different ways, that it's impossible for for any one human being, and even a small group of human beings, to really understand this. So I'll give you one example. I was talking to someone the other day about AWS and how many different compute flavors does AWS have. Just give it a guess. We were talking about that, and I said, "Oh, they probably got a couple hundred." And this person expressed, they were incredulous. Like, there's no way they have a couple hundred, different types of compute nodes. And I looked it up, and guess what? They have 750 compute nodes. So even that's almost a full-time job to keep up with the capabilities and the cost. So you multiply that times, 100,000 in terms of the 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 combinatorial explosion. You really do need tools to help you configure this properly and make sure that you're structuring things well so that it works, it's secure, configured properly, and that from a cost perspective, that you're either optimize it or not setting yourself up for failure or for a big bill. So we're absolutely seeing AI tools that can help us reduce the complexity, and we're definitely seeing specific narrow use cases in some of the zero trust platform providers around analyzing network traffic, making policy recommendations, making configuration recommendations. So that's a really exciting area, and I expect a lot of value to come out of the vendors in the short term.
That zero trust approach is probably more applicable than ever too, and needs to be emphasized. Uh, we talked about it a little bit earlier too. I think zero trust provides very like it simplifies a business approach. And as we talk about complexities, we certainly have the main five pillars of zero trust, and how things can at least be viewed and bucketed in those categories. And then of course we have several steps. I know that the working groups outlined on how to properly implement and even measure zero trust in a lot of ways. And so, Jerry, do you see a lot of commonalities now with cloud and with AI as well?
So I'll start with and Ken probably would talk a lot about this more than I would, but I would start with, AI is not new. I think the generative AI burst that happened in December 2023, where everyone, decided to, oh, this whole new generative AI thing, that's AI. I would argue that, years, decades, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, the user behavior analytics tools that was really bringing in this information with algorithms to determine, oh, wait, Jerry is typing on his keyboard and he's typing at this rate, and we understand that that's what he's doing. That's a form of AI that we've been doing. So there's been I think there's, a lot of identity products, even, all the way back to 2015, 2016, started bringing in some of the machine learning algorithms to drive. How do we do roles? How do we determine access? And so those types of things I think have been coming into the environment for a very long time. And it's not completely new. But where I think the interesting side of this is that generative model, where it's okay, we're going to start looking. Everyone started looking at the generative model and saying, oh, this is really cool stuff. We can use this for different things. But then I've seen it seems like, well, there's some organizations, it's like, hey, we're just going to build our own LLM and we're going to do everything internal and we're going to maintain that because we can keep control of the data and we're not worried about data leakage or any of that stuff going out. There's a whole nother conversation around classification and labeling that you can add to that, but it's a part of part of that internal conversation. Whereas adoption to something like Copilot, where I think it's certainly there's a lot of advantage to bringing that in, especially when you think of the big Microsoft platform play. But a lot of organizations are hesitant, right? So when you think about the cloud adoption, where people were initially hesitant to, hey, wait a minute, we're putting all this stuff in the cloud. Should we be doing this? And should AI have access to our data across our entire platform in the cloud system? I think there's some hesitancy there. And so I'm seeing a lot of commonalities there. I'm seeing a lot of issues, and I think 2025 is going to be an interesting year on how do we adopt AI and how do we bring it into our environment to support zero trust and even some of our other initiatives that an organization, some of our business focused initiatives where it's a marketing focus or it might even be a financial services market focus. But there's a lot of different focuses. I think that it's going to be an interesting year to see what happens.
Yeah, maybe I can cite some example, like some frontier model developers, their policy to move the model and deploy to the cloud available, right? Anthropic has a responsible scaling policy. So it depends on different model level, have different kind of testing and procedure in place before actually make it available. OpenAI last year coming up with preparedness framework. It's also looking like kind of from zero trust perspective, right? Whatever the model is trained, fine-tuned, still don't trust it. And so basically have multiple round of the gatekeeper. So to see where, if this is more from safety perspective, right? To see if it can be deployed. And Microsoft is that actually have the responsible AI impact analysis for all its applications and the models. So I think the frontier model in the bigger industry hyperscaler, they do have the certain procedures policy available. the thing which potentially missing is the startup. The like for now, like what I see is AI safety. Everyone talking about that, and there's not a lot of talking about the AI security. AI security means the CIA, confidentiality, integrity, availability of the AI system, right? Is needed. And the recent CB Insight just yesterday actually released a survey and marked the privacy and security concern as the first barrier for the enterprise to adopt the generative AI. So this year the shift is happening. It's
Right.
previously people overhyped the safety type of that. It's actually happened in California. California has a bill which is actually vetoed by Governor Newsom, right? Because it's not happening. It's like it's too much focus on the safety. Now it's coming back. Like people, if you really want to deploy your applications, it's a security. You need to make sure CIA perspective of the AI system. This is also why in the Cloud Security Alliance, our AI control matrix mainly focus on the safety for the security, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Maybe that's something actually we did learn from that whole, cloud movement. So, Jerry and Ken, you both said the word scale before, and uh, I'll say yes, even, these centralized cloud models we've been using for a long time, but what made it different, what made ChatGPT different was the availability to the public. And so the scale of usage, and with cloud, it became uh, when you were able to just purchase cloud services, subscription to cloud services with a credit card, and the SaaS market just kind of blew up. And uh, you talked a lot about how the frontier models are doing amazing things, but it's the small models that we're getting a little bit concerned about how they're measuring safety and security. And it was like that in cloud, right? Where eventually we saw, a big three in, at least from an infrastructure as a service provider perspective, but the SaaS market was still something that people even today are still struggling with, right? Because we don't know how each of these SaaS products and providers are they putting the right security measures in place. We do have mechanisms now today, but I know that's still a challenge. And Jason, are you seeing kind of some of that stuff too? Ken talked about the small AI models being a concern, and maybe we need to take a different approach with those.
In the model and also applications,
Yeah,
some
yeah,
startup, right? Yeah.
yeah. The startups
Yeah,
for
for
sure.
sure. I mean, it is the Wild West in terms of legal implications of this, T's and C's, the overall security posture of these organizations, because my organization, my company, let's say we're using this AI service from company X and we pay for the enterprise tier. Great. That means our data is going to be private. It's not going to be mixed in. But guess what? We don't really know that's the case. And guess what? These AI firms are also going to be targets. So they're going to be breached and data is going to be taken and exposed, just like it happens with any cloud service today. So we have to expect that. And organizations have to make this balance between, okay, let's look at models that we can run in-house. Now, that doesn't come for free. There's a lot of overhead associated with that. So there needs to be a thoughtful decision around this and in terms of risk capabilities and costs and the staffing. There's no obvious answers there.
Well, I know we're burning through the time that we had here, and maybe I'll jump to the last question that we had too, just because I think it's really interesting. We've talked about just the AI market, and I really like how we've talked about how the AI market has a chance not just utilizing zero trust to secure the AI market, but there's going to be a lot of AI tooling that we're going to be using to actually implement a lot of these zero trust principles and practice that we want to utilize. So with that, and Jason, maybe we'll start with you because you were speaking so eloquently before. Do we see, what opportunities do we see right now in the market for zero trust and AI? Whether it's looking for like spots in the market that we see, hey, we need a tool that can do this to really help zero trust secure today's compute systems.
I, I think one of the biggest challenges is that enterprise practitioners really struggle to get their arms around just the complexity in their environment. And we touched on some of this. Jerry mentioned using AI to make role recommendations or using AI to help look at log analysis. So there's so many areas where you simply don't have the staff, or you have a huge explosion in the scale and the amount of data that you're getting from logs or new identity contextual information. So I'm really optimistic that zero trust tool and platform providers are going to be really using AI capabilities to help enterprises more quickly take advantage of the capabilities and more quickly and more effectively apply them in their environments.
Yeah, I like that. Like, so aiding staff when it comes to collecting that data, collecting that evidence that we need, even analyzing through that too. And I'm just thinking about that too. Boy, that's going to come in the forms of existing products that we already, have for like just I'm just thinking like Sims and other products that kind of do that today. But as well as I think there's a market for agents too that can aid some of these either analysts or incident response managers,
Yeah,
aiding them and leveling up their capabilities or their abilities. That'd be pretty cool.
absolutely.
Yeah, I like that. Jerry, what do you think? What are you seeing out there?
But I think data is a huge security risk, right? And so I think that an organization struggle when Jason and I go talk to customers and we talk about zero trust and we talk about the data pillar, there's always a conversation of how do we classify, how are we creating privacy, how are we ensuring tagging and labeling and driving real access policies to data. It's overwhelming, right? So it's really a piggyback on what I think Jason already said to an extent, but it's really focused on, well, how do we start to secure and manage our data? While we know that the AI is reliant upon the data, but it's also going to be a tool that's going to help us support and drive how we do secure and tag and tag those data assets.
Nice. Like you talk about
Yeah,
data
maybe
classification,
yeah, I
right?
add something. It's more like forward thinking. Uh, we have so many security tools, CNAP, XDR, SIM, all this, right? On the different level, cloud application, all this. Um, the also in terms of SOC. Who will be able to to have a new overarching tool? It's possible or not? Which is a zero trust and security tool, because currently there's so many different tools. The organization actually trying to maintain all this tool is a headache, right? So some organizations say, okay, we don't have the staff to maintain it, so let's forget about that. Uh, so, so I do believe Microsoft may have the shot, because currently Microsoft security is the biggest market, right? It has Defender or this Sentinel tool for cloud and for the other as well. Um, they have the security pilot. Of course, Google also has a Gemini AI or Duet. Can they actually moving forward with a overarching zero trust tool? We don't know, but there's a lot of um, startup, so many startup actually using, like John, you said, using agent potentially because it's autonomous. It can go collecting the network logs, application logs, web logs, database logs, right? Analyze, correlate them, and then submit a ticket to ServiceNow, and then kick off this investigation, maybe, right, and potentially resolve it. you know so but this is the future, but it's a forward thinking.
Ken, that's what I wanted to hear, man. I know the big guys are going to create stuff that we're going to use because we use those tools anyways, but I want to know what the next big thing is so I can help create it.
Yeah,
But hey,
the tool consolidation is happening, I think,
yeah,
for security, uh, but have to use an agent, multiple agent,
I tell
right?
you,
Orchestration.
I just want an agent that's going to sort my email for me intelligently. How about that?
Yeah,
I yeah, I
that's
think that's being
I think it's potentially you can using Google has a agent, Like it's not available yet, but it will be soon.
Well,
Google
yeah,
with Gmail.
Gemini for Gmail. I know Copilot for Outlook is there. Yeah, I can't wait for that too. Ken, I wanted to recap a couple things that you and Jerry said though too. Uh, Jerry, you mentioned the whole AI to aid in like data classification. I think is big too, and you went into access, and I know we've talked about context-based access control, and what a huge role AI can play in helping build context for access control. And then going back into what you said, Ken, too, with AI, posture management across the entire environment. We've all been struggling for that single pane of view across our entire environment, and that's another dream scenario. But hopefully, somebody really smart listening is thinking about that and is going to create the next big thing for us to use. So yeah, with that, I think we are right at the money mark. Thanks so much for your time. I love talking to the three of you. Everybody, Ken Huang, Jason Garbus, Jerry Chapman. This is our Zero Trust panel for the AI Summit. Thanks for coming. Thanks for being here. We hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.